As promised, CX trends from 2019 and how to make the most of them. This is one of those sessions that people love to tweet about, and so for the people who are not in this room, I know they'd appreciate seeing some of these great stats. And so please help me in welcoming Ted Smith, our Director of Product Marketing here at Zendesk. Ted?
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks a ton for joining this session. This is really a session that is near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about the top CX trends from 2019 and how your support team can make the best of them. So my name is Ted Smith. I lead a team here at Zendesk that focuses on research and market insights. And I am thrilled that a little bit later on, we're going to be joined by a great Zendesk customer. So Jake Howell, who runs support operations at Scoop, is going to join us and talk about how they're applying these top trends to their business. So really excited to have Jake up here in a second. Before we jump in, just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. So first, we're going to talk about some big takeaways from our research around how customer expectations are rising. Then we're going to show you where our benchmark data set comes from and show you why we think it's the best source of data out there around how companies are interacting with their customers. Then it's going to get fun. Then we're going to start going into some key metrics and show you how your teams might compare to other organizations in the Bay Area. And then finally, we're going to get Jake up on stage, and we're going to learn a little bit more about how Scoop is making the best of these trends for their business. We're going to do our best to save some time for Q&A at the end of the session, but it is a packed session, so we'll see if we get there. So with that, let's jump right into it. So our research uncovered a number of big trends, but the overarching headline is this: customer expectations are rising, and they're rising faster than ever. You know, in this world where entirely new business models are created on the back of the customer experience, we as consumers have come to expect a lot more from the businesses we work with. The power really has shifted to the consumer. And we see this in countless examples in our personal lives, right? We know the companies like Dollar Shave Club and Uber and Airbnb, these businesses that have been built on these entirely new customer experiences, which are really upping the stakes for everyone out there. And we see this in our research as well. So we went out and we spoke to a whole bunch of consumers, and one of the things we heard was that companies in consumer-facing industries are expecting that those companies are providing the best customer service, that they're saying consumer-facing companies are providing the best customer experiences out there. But what's really interesting is if we look at our own benchmark data, we see the opposite is true. We actually see that B2C companies tend to be falling behind B2B companies in customer satisfaction. And so what this means is that everyone out there, regardless of industry, is really getting compared to those few shining examples out in the industry. So whether you are a 100-year-old financial services institution or a fast-growing, high-tech startup, your customers are comparing you to the best experiences they've ever had. And we see this. If you look at the slide here, you can see that both customers we spoke with and agents we spoke with, they both told us that customer expectations are higher than they were even 1 year ago. And so we know that customers are broadly more demanding and less satisfied with their customer service interactions, and we see it in our benchmark data. I think Sarah touched on some of this earlier, but we've actually seen a global dip in customer satisfaction across the companies we measure over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, global customer satisfaction is down 2 percentage points, and it's down 1 percentage point in just the past year alone. If we double click and we look at the Bay Area, we actually see that trend is even more pronounced. If you look at this blue line on the graph here, you'll see that customer satisfaction in the Bay Area is down 4 percentage points over the last 5 years. And so this is really a symbol and recognition of the fact that these customer expectations have been rising rapidly. Okay, so we know that customer expectations are rising. We know that global CSAT is down, but why does this matter? Why does this matter to your business? Well, there is a ton of research out there that points to the fact that this has a direct impact on your business and your bottom line. Like this study from the Northridge Group, they found that 81% of customers will leave a business as a result of a bad customer experience. Or this research from Forrester, which found that customer experience leaders are growing at 5 times the rate of customer experience laggards. So doing this right or doing it wrong has a direct impact on revenue and the bottom line. All right, so that's a quick overview of why we see leading companies are raising the stakes in customer experience and the importance it has for businesses. Now what I want to do is I want to spend a few minutes talking you through our own benchmark data set and help you understand how your team stacks up. So we are really, really, really lucky at Zendesk in that we have almost 150,000 paying customers who are using our product every day. And what that means is we have a lot of data around how companies are interacting with their customers. We saw almost 2 billion tickets in 2018. It touched almost 1.7 million agents and 600 million end users. So that's a ton of data around how businesses are interacting with their customers. And so what we've done is we harness all this data in something we call the Zendesk benchmark, which is really about, it's a data index around how companies are interacting with their customers. In this benchmark, we have 45,000 companies in over 140 countries. And so we have this great globally representative data set around how companies are interacting with their customers. Now, before we dive into some of the findings, I want to have a little bit of fun here. So we're going to do one old-fashioned hand poll here. So here's the question for you. Which emoji do you think gets used in customer service interactions in the Bay Area most frequently? So your options are A, the wink face, B, the shrugging person, C, the thumbs up, or D, the crying sad face. So I want to do this with a quick show of hands. So who thinks it's A, the wink face? Okay, a couple of hands. What about the shrugging person? A few more hands. What about C, the thumbs up? A lot more hands. And what about D, the crying sad person? So a little bit less there. So it seems like we kind of had a bunch of, everyone thinks each one of these might be representative, but it looked like C was the favorite choice of the audience, the thumbs up. That's actually not correct. In the Bay Area, we actually see the sad crying face as the #1 used emoji in customer service intersections. So really, really sad. But what's interesting, the reason I call this out is that this actually is not what we see in most regions around the globe. Most regions, we tend to see some version of a thumbs up or a really happy smiley face, so a more positive potential emoji. But not exactly clear what's driving this, but one hypothesis we have is that, in the Bay Area, you have a more tech startup-oriented ecosystem, and expectations we see tend to be higher for some of those organizations. And so the fact that a slightly less positive emoji may be shown up more frequently isn't entirely surprising. So let's dive into a little bit of the data here. So Sarah touched on this in the opening, but in the Bay Area, the average CSAT score is 89%. Pretty good, right? Well, it's actually slightly below the average we see globally, which is 90%, and the average we see in the United States, which is 92%. But where this starts to get powerful is when you start to slice and dice this information in a bunch of different ways, which you can see that we've done that on the chart. So let's start with sort of the columns, which is slicing the data by use case. And what you're going to see is that B2C companies tend to receive lower CSAT scores than their B2B and their internal use case counterparts. And there's really 2 reasons we see that are driving that. So first, as we talked about earlier, we see that expectations are higher for B2C companies. But the other thing we see is significantly higher ticket volumes for B2C companies. So on average in our data set, these B2C companies are seeing 5 times the ticket volume of their B2B and internal use case counterparts. And so suddenly that starts to make sense, right? Higher expectations, higher ticket volumes, not a shocker that the CSAT is a little bit lower for B2C companies. The other thing we tend to see is that, and this is another insight that's actually a little bit unique to the Bay Area, but you'll notice that when we look at sort of the rows, smaller companies are tending to have lower CSAT than larger companies. That's not always what we see in the data, but again, I think that's probably a result of the fact that in the Bay Area, you have many of these startups, they're actually very, very small companies, but through technology and through some of the the tools they're using, they have this sort of outsized presence. And so the expectations of what they can deliver from a customer service and experience perspective may be higher than is sort of aligned to the size of the company. And so not a shock, again, that CSAT is a little bit lower for SMB companies in the Bay Area. So, one of the other things I wanted to show you is this scorecard we have. So what you're looking at here, this is actually a scorecard that looks at customer service teams in the Bay Area. So this data is specific to the Bay Area. And for each metric, we've added the benchmark for the high performers, so the companies that are doing CX really well, and the benchmark for the low performers, the companies that have areas for improvement. And a couple of interesting things I want to call out. So first, you'll notice, not surprisingly, but the high performers, they're responding to customer inquiries much faster. They're responding almost 9 times faster than the low performers. They are also doing a much better job of closing tickets with one touch compared to the low performer counterparts. But they're also doing a couple of other really interesting things. Notice that they're investing significantly in self-service. They're investing in helping their customers help themselves, as you can see by the number of help center articles. And then the other thing they're doing is they're much more likely to use apps and integrations. And what that ultimately does is that means they're delivering better context for their agents so that those agents can go on and provide that great customer experience. One data point that isn't on this slide but I want to call out, we also see that the high performers are able to handle significantly higher ticket volumes with much greater efficiency than the low performance. So doing this stuff really, really matters. So that's a real quick dive into sort of some of the data we capture with the benchmark. It hopefully gives you a sense of how you can start to benchmark your own performance against some of your peers. But what I want to do now is I want to bring up Jake from Scoop. Jake and Scoop are doing some really impressive things related to some of these CX trends we're seeing. So with that, I'd like to bring Jake up, and we're going to talk about how Scoop is using some of these things in their business. So Jake, come on up on stage. Jake, thanks for joining us.
Hey,
welcome.
Thanks so much.
So as I mentioned, we're going to dive into sort of how Scoop is applying these trends in their business. But Jake, before we do that, do you mind just giving the audience a quick overview of Scoop and sort of what you're all about?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. So Scoop is the largest carpooling solution in the United States. We partner with innovative companies such as Workday, T-Mobile, LinkedIn to provide carpooling to their workforce. The way we do this is we have an app, so it's easy for commuters to download, schedule a ride as either a rider or driver to from work, and then we handle all the matching, logistics, payments, everything else. So to date, we've put over 7 million carpools on the roads of the United States. We're very proud of that. And we, as a support organization, we call ourselves Scoop Care. Our Scoop Care team, to give you a little bit of an idea, is a team spread across San Francisco and Oregon, and we have 12 humans and 8 dogs as part of that team, and we work directly with carpoolers from anything from general how-to technology questions about using the app itself, policy questions, and then it reaches into different issues that can come up in a community of carpoolers that are riding with each other. So we work closely and hand-in-hand with our trust and safety team as well to make sure we deliver a really good experience.
Awesome. No, thanks for that overview. I mean, I think I love it, right? You're improving people's commutes, taking cars off the road. That sounds like a pretty big win-win for everyone. But what we want to do now is we want to talk through a couple of the top trends that we identified in our research and talk about how Jake and team are putting these trends into action at Scoop. So there's 3 trends we're going to cover. So the first is all about focusing on culture and analytics. Our research shows that these are actually key ingredients to delivering a great customer experience. Secondly, we're going to talk around omni-channel support, and this is really all about meeting customer expectations. Those expectations differ by company, but you've got to understand what they are and be in a position to meet them. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to leverage data and connecting data to make better decisions around how and when you engage with your customers. So our first trend, as I mentioned, is it's all about culture and analytics, right? We know the pressure is on for support teams these days. In our research, we found a couple of interesting couple of interesting findings. So one, 90% of customer service managers that we spoke with told us that their support, the number of tickets, the volume of tickets and customer interactions they have next year is going to grow. 80% told us that the size of their team is going to grow, right? So you have these customer service managers that are facing increasing ticket volumes and this expectation that they're growing their teams. At the same time, when we look at our data, we see that agent tenure is very correlated to CSAT for that agent. And so you have support teams that are facing higher ticket volumes, they're forced to hire more people, and yet agent retention is more important than ever because it's clearly leading to a better customer experience. And so I think the gap here is that while everyone knows this is important, most agents don't feel like they have the tools they need to report on their own success and sort of understand how they're performing. And so that's an opportunity we see for businesses to really help their agents and focus on this culture piece. So Jake, do you mind talking us through sort of how you think about culture at Scoop and what you're doing to make sure that your agents sort of are in the best position to be successful?
Yeah. It's something we talk about a lot. I'd say one of the first things that comes to mind is that we really think about how we can empower the frontline agents with a voice. And this is something core to how we think of product strategy. We don't think we can innovate, build the right products, go the right direction unless we are roping in our support team, having frontline agents as part of the right conversations. I will say it is something that takes time to develop. You can have a voice, but if no one's listening on the other side who makes decisions or leadership isn't bought in, that doesn't go very far. So it really does start at the top. I'd say for us, from like how that looks, we include agents in sprint planning meetings. They're part of roadmap discussions. We have a pretty robust insights sharing process to extract what they're seeing from all the conversations they have with carpoolers, and then bringing those things over to product in a way that's going to be useful for them. To talk a little bit about that insight sharing process, one of the things we found that's really probably obvious but helped us a lot was giving it a clear owner, so it wasn't caught between different teams, but really dedicating someone within our support organization to own that and feel empowered to drive it. And then in doing so, the owner did some internal branding with it as well. So we shifted from a world where we had a lot of spreadsheets, we have data, we've got like generic meetings about like customer feedback, everyone trying to do the right thing, but without this sort of internal branding around this as like a programmatic solution to driving innovation. We didn't really have the same momentum. So for what it's worth, we call ours In Sync, which is sort of for insights syncing. The person who named it, like a Lance Bass fan, I guess. And so I went with it, but the agents are part of the core strategy, and I'd say the other piece that comes to mind is that even with all of this data, quantitative, qualitative, it's still like nothing can replace an in-person conversation. So we set up regular quarterly workshops where we really get agents in the same room with with product people, and we've realized that builds a lot of trust in that what the agents are seeing and saying, they are putting it in context of like what the product strategy we already have in place is, and so there's a trust that what they're going to vocalize throughout the next quarter really will matter, and that we understand like where we're really trying to build.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I love this story so much is I think, making the agent's job about so much more than just responding to customers, right? Really plugging into that product feedback loop, and I think it shows in the data, right? Scoop, a relatively small support team, but promoting 41% of their agents, right? So really giving agents this sort of say in some other things that are going on in the business, and then more importantly, giving them that path to continue to grow their careers.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so the second trend is omni-channel support, and this is from our research, this chart, and a couple of trends I want to call out for you. So one of the things we saw is that, especially in North America, younger people are much more comfortable with self-service. And we saw that more than 90% of Gen Z customers and more than half of millennials, actually when they reach out to a company for support, they start with a search or the company's help center. So they're looking to help themselves as the first line of defense. The other thing we saw with younger people is they tend to be a lot more enthusiastic about some of the newer channels like chat and social media, not shocking. The other trend we saw, though, is that While channel preferences absolutely differ between generation, notice that every generation wants companies to be available on multiple channels. So those channel preferences differ, but this idea of omni-channel, it applies to all generations. And so I think, Scoop is a little bit interesting that, they're primarily a mobile app-based business, and so they're doing some really interesting things about rolling out their omni-channel strategy. So Jake, do you want to talk about how you think about omni-channel and how that plugs into your strategy?
Yeah. So a few benefits come to mind by taking an omni-channel approach. What we've seen, one's pretty obvious, but by putting a mobile to SDK contact form in our app, our carpoolers like it because they're able to contact us in the same place they already are, and so that's powerful. They can use SMS as well to contact us. We've been able to test out and kind of open the floodgates to like a lot of different channels. Some don't work as well as others. We learned a lot along the way. We have the luxury of doing that. If you can do that, you may find some pretty good insights. Another benefit is just purely for like the agent and team side is that they like it more that everything's in one place. There's no context switching. We use Zendesk Text and Zendesk Talk, so it's all in one place. And then for our kind of like the help center side, we've invested in empowering our carpooler community with resources because what we do know is that we put information in front of them, and then every day they talk to each other in carpool. So someone riding to work that's new to Scoop, using Scoop, like guess what they're gonna talk about first is like a common ground is Scoop. And so we really wanna empower them with information that's gonna help like cascade and like build a stronger community, which is like encouraging the good behaviors, how to act, like, and everything to how-to questions get solved. And we can't really like even fully quantify that or track it, which we'd love to, but it's there and it's really powerful.
Yeah. No, and again, I think we talked about this earlier, you've heard this throughout the day, but this idea of really meeting your customers where they are, that's the key piece to omni-channel. Every business is gonna have customers with different preferences around channels and where they want to interact with your business. But you've gotta do the work to understand those preferences and meet them where they are. And I think, community, a great idea. This fact, like every carpool is a little community. That's an important channel for Scoop. And then, in-app, right? The fact that Scoop is allowing customers to engage in-app is all about meeting them where they are, right? 43% of their tickets are coming from the app because that's where their customers want to interact with them. All right, so let's jump into this last trend really quickly. So, one of the things we've been talking about and building for, frankly, a long time at Zendesk is the ability to help businesses connect different disparate sources of data and then use that data to sort of determine and reach out and engage their customers at the right time and at the right place. But nonetheless, in our research, a couple interesting findings that came out of it. To me, the most interesting one was we found that customers are actually really, really receptive to proactive engagement if it's gonna help them get their problem solved, if it's gonna lead to a better customer experience. So the data point I'll call out, 90% of the customers we spoke to, they said that they either look more favorably on or totally neutral about businesses that reach out proactively as long as it's designed to improve that customer experience. And we also heard from agents that 2/3 of their companies are trying to do some version of proactive engagement, but it tends to be really, really manual. And so there's a ton of improvement for how these businesses are thinking about collecting that data, connecting these different data sources, and then using that to engage with their customers. Jake, I know you guys are doing some really interesting things around connecting data and then using it to engage your customers at the right time. Do you want to provide a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, for us, it's an ongoing evolution. We've found that by connecting data points with in-app activity that's happening and what we can see from the carpooler side to automating communication flows at the right time, it's really helped essentially like anticipate a need and then reach out at the right time and deliver a good experience that way. I'll give you kind of like an example of that. So let's say there's like a carpooler who's commuting to work. We'll call her Lily. She's going to Seattle downtown every day, riding in a carpool. She's commuting, but she's trying Scoop for the first time to try out this whole carpooling experience. Let's say she rides in, she has a great ride to work, someone else drove her to work, and then in the evening, if, in the rare case, she doesn't get matched through another Scoop trip home, what we'll do is cover the cost of her alternative transportation, because we want that peace of mind. But she's in meetings all afternoon. Like, we kind of all know what that's like. If you don't know what your ride home is, like, it's nagging you in the back of your mind. How's this going to work? So we'll initiate information sent to her that says, like, here's what you should know about this right now. Your first time going through this experience. We want to make it easy for her to understand, like, and not be stressed out the rest of her day. And then it'll become a dialogue through either text or other means with our support team if she has further questions from there. So that's been really powerful. Again, we're continuing to evolve, but when you can take an approach where all the data lives in one place and you can connect things, then you can evolve. And I think by even these like small little reach out moments, we build a lot more trust with our community because they see that we're there to help before they even had a chance to pick up the phone and call us.
Yeah. Cool. So I know this is a really quick run through, but I think one of the reasons we really wanted to have Scoop tell their story is because I think it's a great example of a company that's taken all these trends together and sort of applying them to their CX. It's not just about omni-channel. It's not just about culture and analytics. You really have to think about all these things holistically and how they all tie into different parts of the customer experience. Those are the companies that in our research, in our data set, the ones that are embracing these trends are definitely the ones that we see on that kind of high performers benchmark rather than the low performers. So I want to wrap up really quickly. I hope this was a helpful, very quick but helpful overview of some of the power of the data that we're able to capture using the Zendesk benchmark. Hopefully it gave you a flavor of how you might benchmark your own team against some of your peers. But if you want to go deeper, we have a whole bunch of resources out there for you. I'm going to point you to one right here. So if you go to zendesk.com/customer-experience-trends, you can get a personalized scorecard that will ask a few questions about your business and then personalize your scores against a set of peers that are very similar to you. So it's a great exercise in helping you start to benchmark yourself against a like set of peers. This is a program we're super excited about, a ton more research that we're working on, so definitely stay tuned and keep your eye out for more research. This is just the beginning. But with that, we have 31 seconds left, so I don't think we're going to get to Q&A, but we will both be floating around outside. So if you have any questions, we would love to chat. I hope it comes across, but I live and breathe this stuff every day. We'd love to talk about it, so would love to get your opinions on it. So with that, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining the session.